We have 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, Ricky, go ahead.
Just to go back to the man and the woman situation, and as the world sees it, you see someone, you fall in love, you get married, you live forever, you live together forever, as opposed to man and woman trusting in God that whomever you are joined to, just the mere fact that God provided that person, you're going to grow to love that person, regardless of what you saw initially. As opposed to the worldview where you look at the person and you suddenly fall in love. That's the perfect person for me. So, issue sometimes is when people talk about, I can't find anyone. Is it a worldview that dictates you finding someone, or is that godly view? What do you search for? What do you look for?
Yeah. So I think that marriage is affected by culture. So in the culture of the Bible, and in many parts of the world today, maybe further east, parents can say, you and you. And people say, okay. And they make that work. We are in a culture that is more individualistic. And so we believe in personal choice. I think there's a lot of flexibility to how we do marriage. That's why God, I think, deals with big picture, and he doesn't come down very granular. The issue, though, I think that the passage is trying to convey is that whatever we do in marriage, the basic idea is that you become one, and not only that you become one, but you respect your differences, and you appreciate those differences. My marriage with my wife has gone better as I've grown older. I relish her differences from me. I like to travel with her because I get connected to people. I go up to people that I've seen at other conferences, and she said, "How are you doing?" And then they say, "You want to have lunch with us?" Before they'd say, "Yeah, of course, it's great seeing you." I'm exaggerating a little. But that I think is a picture that is being painted. I don't know that we can derive a lot of commentary on culturally how we do marriage. Because I think marriage can work by or making a choice, and I think it can work by someone saying, "Hey, let's put these two people together." I think the issue is in the dynamic of the relationship and whether we are able, as Paul says, marriage is about us and Christ and the church, whether we're able to submit to God and based on that submission, make choices how we relate to each other in a way that's godly. If we don't have that, then whether we in the East or right here in Jamaica, it not gonna work. That's my experience. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Devon, go ahead.
Two questions, very quick. The first one is the scripture that I'm looking at in the NIV says that Eve was taken from, Adam's side, the close up at the flesh.
Yeah.
So technically, you could almost say that Eve is Adam's fraternal twin sister.
Hey. We have a scientist in the room. Yeah, keep going, Devon.
Next one, with regards to Eve being the helper.
Yes.
You would think that she being the helper, she's supposed to be helping Adam with his purpose and the reason why he exists, which is to serve God, love God, obey God, and do what God created him to do. So anything apart from that, if she doesn't help him with that, anything apart from that goes out of order with the creation and things fall apart. If she doesn't help him to be what God created him to be. How do you see that?
Yeah, so I would say, I would tweak that a little bit. I don't think she's there to help him to just be what he is supposed to be. I think that they are, if you go back to Genesis 1, they're both created, male and female, in the image of God. So this work of ruling and subduing the earth is something that they both are to do. They are to do it together. They cannot do it any way than together because God says, be fruitful and multiply. Adam cannot do that on his own. And so when we get to Genesis 2, what we have is a picture of how the two are related to each other. And the idea that we have in Genesis 2 is showing us that he has a need because he's alone. And that God he needs this woman in order for him to not be alone, first of all, but for them together to do the work in the garden. And the idea of her being taken from his side is to indicate that they are one. So they are equal. It's not like he is above her. It's not like, what we're going to see after lunch in the fall is that they start doing this. That was never the intention. The intention was for them to be like this. So I think you're right that he needs her to help him, but I want to tweak it a little bit to say it's not so much about him, it's about what they are to be together. And the idea of him being alone, what God is showing, God is saying, yeah, we start with you, Adam, but you know what? You can't do this by yourself. You need this woman. So I would tweak it a little bit, but I get where you're going. But I think that nuance is important because I think it affects how we perceive women. My wife helps me a lot, but I've got to be careful that I'm not thinking that her purpose is just to help me. It's what we are together supposed to be doing in the world in trying to bring heaven down on earth. So there are things that she's doing. My role is to help her in doing that. And it's because I'm selfish, it's very easy for me not to see that. And she's such a giving person, she'll just overflow her banks in meeting my needs. But I need to understand that my role is I'm together with her to bring God's purposes to fruition in the world. So I tweak it that a little bit, Devon. Hope that helps.
Right.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, Marlene, and I think that'll be it, and then we'll do lunch. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's related to the session that we're doing now
Yeah.
on woman and to the session before.
Yes.
And that is the role of the small unit and its role in meeting in realizing God's vision
Yes.
of heaven meeting earth and in New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Because I think that it all comes down to relationships and how we reflect God in those relationships. And so whether it's in the smaller unit of the biological family or the church family, we have this responsibility. And I keep thinking about this responsibility that we have, Courtney, because it's really changing how I see the Christian life. Because, you know, the temptation is always to feel that as long as I live my life as a Christian, I obey the Bible, I become more like Christ, then I will be rewarded with heaven, right? But really and truly, there is a proactive role that we have to play in the realization of God's vision and this New Jerusalem. And it's something I've been thinking about about this responsibility that we have. I have to say that sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed by it because it really calls us to a higher standard of being, and therein lies the challenge of what we need to be.
Yeah. Well said. And thank you for bringing our focus to that as you did on the last occasion when we talked about the image of God. And I think what you're highlighting for us is that as we talk about these things, they're supposed to be changing how we think about who we are as Christians, individually and collectively, but they're also to be changing how we live. It's not just about what we think in our head, but this is supposed to make a difference. It's supposed to make a difference in who we are as individuals, in our families, in our places of work, what we do together as a family group or as a church community wider than our family group. It's not just about our little individual thing where we just try to be righteous and get to heaven. We're supposed to begin to make heaven right here on earth. Now that's worth a lot of meditation. And if you start thinking about that, it changes a lot. That's what God always intended. But I think we miss that message because I think, as we were talking about in the break, sometimes our focus in reading scripture has been a bit narrower. But God is patient, and he knew this day would come that we'd learn some of these things. The question is, what do we do now? And I know in the work that you do, even professionally, there's a tremendous impact that can come in terms of ordering the world and how bringing a Christian perspective to that can make a difference. So it's not like you have this part of your life and this part of your life. All of your life is about bringing heaven right here on earth. That's a great point for us to end and to reflect on as we go to lunch.